Welcome to my channel. I'm Victoria and today we're going to talk about conditionals. I'm going to explain what conditionals are, what types of conditional sentences exist, what are mixed conditionals, when we can omit if, and what other words instead of if we can use. So let's dive in and start with some examples. Look at this sentence. If I were you, I wouldn't buy that car. So this is an example, often a conditional sentence. If, you can see the word if. It's a hypothetical situation. I'm not you, but if I were you, I wouldn't buy that car. Let's look at another example. If I had known about the party, I would have come and hung out. In this example, you can see the word if, but at the same time, I'm using different tenses, past perfect and would have come. So why? Why is that different from the first one? That's because I'm talking about hypothetical past. Okay, so that's just to show you how conditional sentences look like. And now let me explain what types of conditional sentences exist. Let me show you a table where you can find different types of conditional sentences. There are 4 of them, technically 3, but we have type 0, which we use when we talk about general truth, facts, or routines. For example, if people don't drink enough water, they get dehydrated. You can see that in this case, I'm using present simple in both parts, in if part and the second part of the sentence. So usually when we have type 0, we use present simple in both parts of the sentence. Type 1 we use when we speak about possible future. If you sign up for the newsletter, you'll receive a free ebook instantly. Yes, so here you can see something different. In the if part, I'm still using present simple because we cannot use will after if. However, in the second part, since we are talking about the future, we shall use future. You will receive a free book instantly. Type 2 we use when we speak about hypothetical present or future, and that's actually what I just showed you before in the previous example. If I were you, I wouldn't buy that car, remember? So here you can see a different example. If I worked fewer hours, I would finally have time to learn a new language. So when I'm speaking about a hypothetical present situation, I shall use past simple in the if part, yes, if plus past simple or past continuous. I'll show you in a few minutes more examples. And then the second part would contain would and base form of the verb. And finally, you can see type 3. Type 3 we use when we speak about past and real situations. If they had booked the tickets earlier, they wouldn't have missed the concert, right? So here you can see if part contains past perfect, and then the second part of the sentence should have would have plus past participle of the main verb. Yes, so let me show you more examples so you can see how we use it and when we use conditional sentences. Let's look at type 0 sentences, type 0 conditional sentences. So as you remember, we use in both parts present simple just because we speak about general truth, right? So, or facts or routines. If plants don't get enough water, we all know that they stop growing. Yes, they die. So that's common, just knowledge, and that's why we shall use present simple in both cases. Or let's look at one more example. If people eat too much fast food, their health suffers. And again, you can see in both parts we use present simple. Well, just to make it clear, we can definitely change the order of these parts of the sentence. You can say their health suffers or people's health suffers if they eat too much fast food. So we can change it. But still, we shall keep the same approach, present simple, present simple. So that's all about type 0. Let's move on and talk about type 1, conditionals of type 1. So you remember, I also mentioned that in the if part of such sentences, we cannot use will. Well, yes, we mostly use present simple, but sometimes you can use also present perfect if it's appropriate or if it's necessary, or even present continuous, right? So any of present tenses will work in this part. The second part can contain future simple, imperative verb, or modal verbs. So let's have a look at this example. If she forgets her ID, they won't let her into the building. Yes, she forgets, present simple here. They will not let her into the building. Okay, so that's a possibility. If they don't reply by Friday, we'll move forward without them. Okay, yes? So as you can see here, I'm using present simple and future. However, as I mentioned before, you can use imperative verbs. And to give you an example, I can say, if you get some information, call me. Call me is an imperative form of the verb. Yes, and also you can use modal verbs, okay, in that part. So I hope it's clear. And now we're getting to type 2. Type 2 conditionals we use when we speak about hypothetical present or future, and it's often used also to give advice. In this type of conditionals, we should use if plus past simple or past continuous if it's appropriate. And the second part of this sentence will contain would, could, might, plus bare infinitive. Okay, so if I were younger, I would pursue a dream I gave up years ago. You can see some regret. Yes, so here about the present situation. If I were younger, you can see also here that I can use if I was younger, but you know, in more formal or more commonly used, I would say if I were younger. However, both forms are possible in conditional sentences right now. So let's look at one more example. If she lived closer, we would see each other more often. But unfortunately, we don't live close, right? So, and we see each other quite rarely. And here you can see also past simple and would plus bare infinitive. Okay, so that was type 2 conditional, and now we're going to talk about the last type of conditional sentences, which is number 3. And remember, I mentioned that we use when we talk about hypothetical past, something we cannot change. We can use it when we express some regrets or even criticism. Let's have a look at this example. If we had booked in advance, we would have gotten better seats, right? So you can see past perfect in this if part. Yes, if we had booked, and we would have gotten, or we would have got better seats. But unfortunately we didn't, and so I hope you have some clarity about what types of conditional sentences exist. Now let me explain something else. I would like to show you what other phrases we can use instead of if. First of all, unless. Unless means if not. Okay, so let's look at this sentence. Unless you study, you'll fail the exam. Well, you should understand this sentence as if you don't study. Remember, unless is if not. If you don't study, you will fail the exam. This is an example of type 1 conditional sentence. Yes. So just keep in mind, unless as if not. Let's move on. The next phrase, or phrases more precisely, you can see we can use the word providing, provided that can be omitted, as long as or so long as in more informal way. So that would give you also the same idea of the sentence if you use those instead of if. Let's look at this one example. She could have finished earlier provided that no one had interrupted her. You can read it as she could have finished earlier if no one had interrupted her. So you see that this is an example of the third conditional, had interrupted, yes, in this if part, or provided that in this case, or we can say just provided. And could have finished earlier is this second part, or in this case it's the first part, but the second part of the sentence which doesn't include any linking words. Okay, so let's move on. We can also use on condition that, or on the condition that, only if instead of if. They agreed to fund the project on condition that we met all the deadlines. Yes, so you can read the sentence as they agreed to fund the project if we met all the deadlines. Okay, so here we can see that basically instead of if, you can use on condition that. Okay, one more. Supposing, or what if, for instance. Supposing you lost your passport abroad, what would you do? Yes, it's a kind of type 2 sentence. What would you do? Hypothetical. What if someone finds out? What will you do? Usually these structures are used in conversations, and we can speak about some situations in the future, some imaginary situations. Yes? Okay, so a few more examples. In case of, yes, in case of delay, the company will notify you by email. Or in case of bad weather, the match will be postponed. So you see, in case of requires a noun or a gerund form, but in both cases we have a noun. Let me show you one more example with another structure, but for, and then we shall use a noun or a gerund form. So what does it mean but for? But for in this case means if it weren't for, or if it hadn't been for. As in this example, but for the rain, we would have gone hiking. What does it mean? How to understand the sentence? You can read it as if it hadn't rained, we would have gone hiking, which clearly is type 3 conditional, right? But instead of this part, if it hadn't rained, so we can use a noun and a phrase but for, prepositional phrase. Okay, so but for exercising regularly, I'd be out of shape. If I didn't exercise regularly, I would be out of shape. This is type 2, but I actually do exercise regularly. That's why I'm in a good shape. So you can see this but for structure is more advanced and more formal maybe. So that's why I would recommend practicing creating your own sentences so you understand it better. And basically, so far, that's all, but you can download a PDF where you will find a table with all those structures, with some additional ones that you can use instead of if. And now it's time to move on and speak about mixed conditionals. Okay? So what are mixed conditionals? What are those? As you can understand from its name, mixed means that we will combine, we will mix two different types of conditional sentences. There are different combinations as long as it makes sense and it's logical. So, but the most widely maybe used in life and practically used are those. As you can see, type 3 plus type 2, for example, if I had been invited, I would go tonight. Maybe we're talking about party tonight, but I wasn't invited in the past, and that's why I'm using here if I had been invited. This is past perfect, but also passive structure. Yes, had been invited. And I'm speaking about present situation. I would go tonight. Yes, so this is mixed, third and second conditional. Let's look at this second example. If he studied more regularly, he will do well in the next test. Yes, so here you can see if he studied more regularly, this is the type 2 conditional. You can see the second part, he will do well in the next test. It means future. So here this structure is maybe less used, but still it's possible and it's plausible. And look at this combination, type 2 and type 3. If you were more focused, you would have finished the project by now. Yes, so we're talking about the current situation. The person is not focused or is not really organized well in general. And that's why the person couldn't finish the project by deadline. So you would have finished the project by now. It's part of the third conditional. Yes, so the person didn't do it. Let's have a look at some examples, okay, and do some paraphrasing. Let's imagine the situation, and it happens to everyone sometimes. She didn't sleep well, so she's really grumpy now. Okay. How to create this, maybe how to paraphrase this sentence or these two sentences, these two parts into conditional sentence. So apparently there are two parts, one from the past, she didn't sleep well, and one from present, she's really grumpy now. Okay, so if she had slept well, she wouldn't be grumpy. That's the conditional sentence, yes? But she didn't. So if she had slept well, this is unreal past, type 3, past perfect. And she wouldn't be grumpy now. It's a hypothetical present, type 2. So you see, this is mixed conditional. Okay, now let's look at one more example. He forgot to charge his phone, so he can't call us later. And again, you can see one action in the past and one action is about actually present or even future. He can't call us later. And if you need to paraphrase it or use conditional, you can do it this way. He would be able to call us later if he had charged his phone. Okay? So in this case, you can see he would be able to. This is part type 2 conditional. Instead of can, yes, would be able to. And this next part, if part, is about past. So that's past perfect. If he had charged, but he didn't do it, we know it. Okay, that's another example of mixed conditional where we use part type 2, and type 3 conditional sentences. Okay. Let's look at one more. He's so careless that he broke his phone last week. So you can see again, he wouldn't have broken his phone if he wasn't so careless. Okay, but he is careless. So this is type 2. If he wasn't so careless, and type 3, he wouldn't have broken. And now let's move on, and I would like to talk about inversion, or when we can omit if, and if we omit it, what shall we do? So inversion is when we change verb subject order, yes, and it looks sometimes like questions, but the structure is similar to questions, but it is not a question. It's called inversion. So we use it mostly in formal English. It's widely used in formal English. Instead of if, you can hear people using sentences such as, should we decide to move abroad, we will let you know well in advance. So here you can see, instead of if we decide to move abroad. Yes, the first part, if we decide, this is clearly type 1, future possibility, type 1 conditional. But instead of if we decide, we can use should we decide. When you have type 2 conditional, you can use were at the beginning of the sentence. Were you in my position, what would you do? So you can use it instead of, if you were in my position, what would you do? So you basically invert verb and the pronoun here. Okay? And finally, type 3. So in this case, you will just revert or reverse the verb had. You will use it at the beginning. Had they arrived earlier, they wouldn't have missed the flight. Yes, instead of saying if they had arrived earlier, they wouldn't have missed the flight. So in this case, it's pretty much easy to understand. You just have to know that it exists, and we invert it in more formal structures, and it's widely used actually in written language. Should you have any questions, please contact me, for example. Speaking about should, I just want to add a little bit here. As you can see, sometimes people use happen to with should. Should you happen to? Should you happen to be unavailable for the meeting, please let us know. Happen to is more formal and the condition is less likely. So I want you to know that it exists, and it is also correct. It is also inversion of the type 1 sentence, conditional sentence, but it's more formal. Okay. So that's mostly everything I wanted to highlight in this video. I would like to mention that you can find a list of extra words, other expressions that can be used instead of if. And I'm showing you right now some examples. You can definitely explore those and practice by creating your own sentences. This is the best way to learn. Create your sentences that are relevant to your situation. So guys, that's all for today. I hope you learned a lot. You can download a free PDF with rules and some examples in this video description. And if you like the video, please subscribe, share with your friends, and follow me to learn more about English grammar. See you in my next video. Bye bye!